I agree completely that audio gear is some of the highest value gear out there, some of the highest value tech that we can invest in, but I intentionally left off audio gear from my list because for me, that would have been a bit obvious. I didn't want last week's episode to just be a follow-on to pretty much every single podcastage video. Microphones, 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 and on this second channel, microphones, 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 more microphones. I wanted justification to talk about the non-audio input side of things because I very rarely do. So that is why I left off audio input gear, why I left off preamps and microphones and interfaces and cameras, all of that stuff that I use for podcasting and YouTube. But I do agree. One of the highest value items that I have is the Shure SM57. And if Ricky from Audio Haze is listening, I know he just jumped up out of his chair screaming, "Yahoo! Finally! Bandrew didn't mention the SM7B. He mentioned the SM57. The reason this is one of the highest value pieces of equipment that I have, this is one of the oldest. I got this 14 or 15 years ago, and I paid the massive sum of $0. I won this in a remix competition along with a Blue Icicle audio interface. And if I don't call that high value, nothing is. A free microphone, or I guess a microphone for exposure? Is that kind of what it is? Hey, do all this work that's extremely valuable and we'll give you $100 microphone. But even if I bought this 15 years ago for $100, the fact that it still functions the same as it did day one is incredible. Because how many modern pieces of technology have that kind of lifespan? I don't think there is much, especially in the digital age. It seems all of the items that do have that kind of lifespan are mainly analog. Analog headphones, microphones, analog preamps. When you get to interfaces, those are much more digital and have a shorter life. The higher end stuff may maintain a lot more support, driver support, high enough quality components that they do not become obsolete as quickly. But I can guarantee you a fully analog preamp is going to be relevant and functional and non-obsolete much longer than a digital audio interface. But I agree with you completely. Audio gear is some of the highest value stuff that is available on the market, and I have posted about this and spoken about this many times over the last couple of years. The reason I love covering audio gear is because it's so counter to modern technology where you have this planned obsolescence. You'll get 6 years of use out of a $1,400 phone, then they stop updating it. But when I cover an SM57 7 years ago, the video may suck by today's standards, but the information, the demos, the tests, the conclusions are all still relevant because that microphone is still being manufactured, the microphone still performs well. So when I look at the amount of time that I spend making these videos, I view that as a really good investment of my time because years on, a lot of those videos are still relevant. On top of that, I feel good because I am covering a lot of gear, not all the gear I cover, but a lot of the gear that I cover has a long life. So I'm not promoting or advocating for gear that leads to overconsumption. I'm advocating and covering gear that will give you decades of use and in the long term, give you a very low cost per use. If I spent $100 on this SM57, 15 years on, the cost per use would probably be a penny. If I was talking about the U87, I need to still use that a lot more to get the cost of use down. U67 even more so, but I think you get the point. You're buying these high quality items that last you a lifetime if they're treated well. And I feel good about covering that type of gear as opposed to stuff that is much more disposable or that has planned obsolescence or just a shorter life, like a smartphone, like a tablet. These are all items that I do get value out of, but are undeniably. They have a shorter lifespan, but are also more disposable, for lack of a better term, compared to something like the 57, the SM7B. Sit down now, Ricky. I mentioned it, one of my all-time favorites, which I do love more than the 57. I had to throw that in there as I have music start playing in the background, just this click track that I've been practicing to, just driving me crazy. I put the microphone on the play button on my keyboard. That's why that happened. Been practicing to a click a lot, and the click is a cowbell. I don't think I had anything else to say because I lost my train of thought. Thanks a lot, cowbell. Next, we have a comment from MEI Studio New York, Pags. He says, "My studio has so much gear that is decades old that we still use. That's real value gear. My Digi 192s are still running. I have mic pre's and compressors from the late 90s and early aughts. I have mics from as far back as the 1930s. An almost 100-year-old piece of gear is more than incredible value in my opinion. That audio still comes out of it at all is impressive. The fact that it still has decently rich tone is even more so. Modern tech, not really much of a gadget person, but I do have an iMac from before 2010 that's still chugging along just fine since I put Linux on it. It's now used as a research machine to just go on the net and play music and such, but it's still serving a purpose and isn't taking up space in a landfill." Pags, thank you very much for the comment, and thank you for sharing the items that you find to be high value.